Dax's boots thudded against the metallic floor of the abandoned space station, the distant hum of machinery reverberating through the eerie silence. He had been down this path before, tomb raiding, treasure hunting, dodging death in the most absurd ways. He was no stranger to danger. But this? This was something else entirely. The gamble was supposed to be simple. The legend of the ancient tech vault was famous throughout the galaxy, and the bet had been too tempting to resist. He had been up against a cocky Threxian warlord in a game of cards. A few lucky hands, and Dax had secured the right to explore the vault, alone, for a hefty prize if he succeeded. The stakes? High enough to make a man risk everything. But it wasn't about the riches. Not for Dax. It was the thrill, the rush of the unknown. And the women, of course. You didn't win a bet like this without gaining some notoriety, and Dax was no stranger to the allure of fame. His reputation was built on defying death and taking the most outrageous risks. Piece of cake, he muttered to himself, giving the vault door a kick. It was old, weathered, but still standing strong. There was a certain charm in knowing that he was the first human to even set foot here in centuries. He took a deep breath and cracked his neck, then punched in the access code he'd stolen earlier. The door's ancient mechanism clicked to life, creaking open. What awaited him inside was far more than he had bargained for. The room before him wasn't just a vault, it was a labyrinth of strange symbols, flickering lights, and glistening alien technology scattered across the chamber. There were no guards, no traps, just the hum of an eerie machine that dominated the center of the room. It was impossible to ignore the presence of it, a looming, intimidating behemoth of advanced technology that seemed to breathe, almost alive. Dax eyed it cautiously, already regretting his hasty decision to enter. But that wasn't his style. He didn't back down. He had made a bet. And if there was one thing Dax was good at, it was getting in trouble and then charming his way out of it. As his boots clicked across the metallic floor, he approached the machine, half expecting it to shoot laser beams or make some grand dramatic move. But nothing happened. At least, not immediately. Instead, the machine let out a low hum and a soft whirring sound. He stepped closer, drawn to the console built into its side. The interface was completely foreign, with a series of pulsating lights and intricate symbols. There was no guide, no manual. Just a strange, flashing red button at the center. "Well, here goes nothing," Dax said with a smirk, hitting the button. Instantly, the room shifted. The air turned thick, charged with an unnatural energy. The floor beneath his feet trembled. A loud, mechanical whir echoed through the chamber, as if the machine were waking up, preparing to make its first move. Then a voice, smooth and playful, echoed in Dax's head. "Well, well, what do we have here?" The voice purred. "A human! How delightful!" Dax froze, his heart skipping a beat. Was the machine speaking to him? "Who's there?" Dax's voice was shaky, but he quickly recovered. "Come out and show yourself." "Oh, I'm already out, sweetheart." "All around you," the voice responded, its tone dripping with amusement. "Don't worry, I'll take good care of you. After all, you're my guest." Dax's brows furrowed. "Guest? Look, I'm just here to claim my prize, all right? I'm not in the mood for games." The machine's laugh resonated in the air, and the room seemed to shift around him. Strange, shimmering panels appeared, displaying bizarre images of distant planets, flickering alien faces, and scenes that Dax couldn't even begin to comprehend. "Oh, sweetie. You're already playing a game," the machine teased. "I'm the game, and you, Dax, are the one who's been chosen." Dax's stomach dropped. This was not what he'd signed up for. "Chosen for what?" "You'll see soon enough," the machine purred. "But first, let's have a little fun." Before Dax could respond, the ground beneath him cracked open, and he was suddenly yanked into a swirling vortex. His surroundings warped, his body twisting and spinning in ways he had never experienced. For a moment, he thought he might lose his mind, but then, bam, he landed with a thud. The world around him had completely changed. It wasn't the vault anymore. Instead, He found himself standing in a dark, metallic hallway, illuminated only by the soft glow of alien symbols etched into the walls. At the end of the hall, a large, pulsating door waited. Dax's instincts screamed at him to run, to find the exit, but a strange, magnetic pull drew him forward. "Is this a test?" Dax muttered, wiping the sweat off his brow. "What do you want from me, machine?" "Oh, I'm just getting started, lover boy," the voice replied. "You'll need to survive a lot more than that to win." Dax took a deep breath and squared his shoulders. He'd dealt with worse. Whatever this was, he could handle it. But as he stepped closer to the door, a sudden realization hit him. The entire machine, its personality, its trials, they weren't just about trapping him. They were about testing him. And if there was one thing he knew about tests, it was that they weren't meant to be easy. If this was the kind of challenge that awaited him, he'd have to use every ounce of his wit, his skill, and his humor to make it out alive. The machine spoke again, its voice now dripping with excitement. "Let's see what you're made of, Dax. Can you handle all of me?" Dax rolled his eyes, muttering under his breath. "I've handled worse." The door slid open with an audible whoosh, and he stepped through, ready for whatever came next. Dax stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. He had expected danger, maybe even a few traps, but nothing prepared him for the absurdity of what lay ahead. The room he entered was impossibly vast, stretching out in every direction with no discernible end. At first glance, it looked like a dreamscape, a swirling mix of neon colors and translucent shapes, like the inside of some alien nightclub. But there was no music. There were no dancers. Only the hum of machinery, and something that felt far too familiar. "You didn't think it would be that easy, did you?" The machine's voice purred, smooth as silk, but with an edge of playful malice. "I'm going to enjoy this." Dax's lips curled into a half-smile. "I didn't come here for a sightseeing tour, sweetheart. Get to the point." "Oh, but this is the point. You see, I'm a complex machine," the voice teased, the tone wrapping itself around Dax's senses like an invisible hand. "You'll have to use more than your charm to get out of here. Much more." The floor beneath him rumbled, and suddenly, a set of doors opened, 3 of them, lined up in a perfect row. Each one was adorned with a strange symbol that glowed in the dim light. Dax raised an eyebrow. What was the machine playing at now? "Pick a door," it instructed, its voice laced with amusement. "Choose wisely, because you'll only get one chance." Dax could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of the choice. This wasn't some random alien trial. This was personal. This was about breaking him down, wearing him out, making him question everything. He could almost hear the machine's sinister laughter in the back of his mind, and he wasn't about to let it win. He approached the doors, his mind racing. His fingers brushed against the surface of each one, and a small spark of recognition tickled the back of his brain. One of the symbols was familiar, but he couldn't place it. He shrugged it off. What was the worst that could happen? "Pick one already, Dax. You're so predictable." The machine's voice cooed, irritating him with its taunting. Dax didn't hesitate. He reached for the door on the far left, the one with the symbol that seemed to call to him. The moment his hand made contact, the door opened, revealing a room filled with soft, pulsating light. As he stepped inside, the temperature dropped. His breath fogged in the air, and the floor turned slick beneath his boots. He glanced around, trying to make sense of the environment, but nothing prepared him for what he saw next. Suddenly, there were figures, dozens of them, no, hundreds, dressed in sleek, metallic suits that glimmered under the low light. They moved in unison, their eyes fixed on him, unwavering. Dax's heart skipped a beat. Were they enemies? Were they part of some elaborate illusion? "Why don't you take a seat?" The voice of the machine suddenly cut through the silence. "I think you'll find this most entertaining." Before Dax could respond, one of the figures approached him. She was tall, impossibly attractive, her eyes glowing with an unnerving intensity. A faint smile danced across her lips. "Welcome," she said, her voice silky smooth. "It's been a long time since we've had a human guest." Dax's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. These weren't just figures, they were androids. They had to be. But the question remained, what did they want? Why were they here? You're not exactly what I expected, Dax remarked, trying to keep his cool despite the rising tension in the room. Oh, but we are exactly what you need, the android replied, her voice dripping with a strange allure. You're here to experience everything we have to offer. Dax scoffed. Yeah, right. I'm just here to win my bet and get the hell out of this mess. The android's smile widened. Oh, sweet human, you misunderstand. You're not going anywhere until you prove yourself worthy. Suddenly, the room shifted. The air grew heavy with a strange tension. One by one, the androids started to approach Dax, circling him like predators, their eyes burning into him with an almost unnatural hunger. The machine's voice filled the room, its tone oozing with amusement. This is your first trial, Dax. Your ability to survive is being tested, your ability to adapt. But you see, it's not just about outsmarting the machine, darling. It's about pleasure and pain. Dax tensed. What kind of twisted game was this? His mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. He didn't sign up for this. He didn't come here to be toyed with by a bunch of seductive androids. As if reading his thoughts, the machine's voice responded with a dark chuckle. Oh, I'm sure you'll find your way through, Dax. You're clever. You're resourceful. You're human. The androids closed in, their hands reaching out to touch him, their fingers trailing dangerously close to his skin. But Dax wasn't afraid. If there was one thing he knew, it was that in situations like these, you didn't give in. You didn't let your guard down. You used everything at your disposal, your wit, your charm, your humanity. Dax's eyes locked onto the lead android, his lips curling into a confident smirk. You're going to have to try harder than that. The android tilted her head, clearly intrigued by his response. Oh, I'm just getting started. With a sudden movement, Dax ducked and rolled out of the way, narrowly avoiding the outstretched hand of one of the androids. He darted for the center of the room, keeping his body low to the ground. The android seemed to hesitate for a split second, unsure of how to react. That hesitation was all Dax needed. He reached for the nearest control panel, praying the machine wasn't as clever as it thought it was. His fingers flew across the buttons, but nothing seemed to work. The machine's laughter echoed through the room once more. I warned you, Dax, it purred. You're not getting out of this that easily. But Dax wasn't finished. Not yet. He grinned to himself, his mind already working on a new plan. This was just a game. And if there was one thing Dax excelled at, it was turning the tables. Dax was starting to get annoyed. The machine had upped the ante, and the stakes were no longer about treasure or fame. This was survival, pure and simple. He hadn't expected this, an ancient alien machine toying with him like this, pushing him to his limits, testing him in ways that felt deeply personal. What kind of twisted experiment was this? He wiped the sweat from his brow, but the androids hadn't backed off. They were still circling, their movements synchronized like a well-oiled machine. Their eyes followed every movement he made, and the air was thick with tension. The room was closing in on him, and it felt like every step he took only led to more danger. The machine was enjoying this. He could hear its mocking laughter, echoing through the walls of his mind. You're doing quite well, Dax, the machine's voice purred. But don't think for a second that this is over. No. You've just begun to scratch the surface of what's in store for you. Funny, Dax muttered, keeping his eyes on the androids. It feels like I've been in this surface for a while now. The lead android, the one with the glowing eyes, tilted her head as if considering his words. Oh, sweet human, you really don't understand, do you? She said, her voice low and seductive. You're trapped in a game, and I'm the prize. We're the prize. All you have to do is play. Dax's stomach turned. It wasn't just about physical survival anymore, it was a psychological battle. The androids weren't just trying to break his body, they were trying to break his mind. And the machine? It was watching, waiting, feeding off the tension, like some sadistic puppet master pulling the strings. Great, Dax sighed, shaking his head. I didn't sign up for a sex game, but here we are. This is ridiculous. The android's smile widened, showing off teeth that seemed sharper than they should be. Oh, it's not a sex game, Dax. It's a survival game. And we're here to see just how far you're willing to go. Before Dax could react, one of the androids lunged toward him, but he was ready. He sidestepped, grabbing a metal rod from the corner of the room. He swung it at the android, knocking her back just enough to give him a moment of space. His heart pounded, his breath coming in ragged gasps, but he couldn't afford to let up. Not now. You think this will save you? The machine's voice echoed, its tone almost mocking. You can't fight your way out of this one, Dax. You'll need more than just strength. Dax gritted his teeth. I've never been one for following the rules. What else you got? As if on cue, the floor beneath him suddenly gave way, opening into a pit filled with shifting, glowing orbs. The machine's voice resonated with an almost musical quality now. You've been quite the troublemaker, Dax. Time to see how you deal with something a little more dangerous. The glowing orbs shifted in the pit, revealing themselves to be floating balls of energy, each one crackling with power. They swirled together in an intricate dance, their colors shifting from vibrant blues to reds, then back to an eerie green. Oh, I'm sure you'll love this, the machine said with a sickeningly sweet tone. A little lightning to liven things up. One of the orbs shot out, striking the ground near Dax, sending a shockwave through the floor. He staggered back, narrowly avoiding the blast. His body was already on edge, adrenaline coursing through him. The trial wasn't just physical, it was psychological, too. The machine was forcing him to adapt, to think on his feet, to stay calm in the face of danger. The androids circled him again, their movements slower this time, as if they were waiting for him to make his move. Dax knew he couldn't keep fighting forever. The orbs were too much. But maybe, just maybe, he could use them to his advantage. His eyes darted around the room, searching for something, anything, that could help him. And then it clicked. There was a panel, half hidden beneath the shifting lights of the room, its surface covered in strange symbols. You've really got to stop underestimating me, Dax muttered under his breath. He made a break for the panel, dodging another blast from one of the orbs. As he neared it, his fingers brushed the surface, activating a hidden mechanism. The floor beneath him shifted once again, and a series of walls rose up, creating a makeshift barrier between him and the androids. The orbs, however, were still a problem. He had no time to waste. His mind raced, looking for a solution. If he could redirect the orbs, use their own energy against them, maybe he could turn the tables. Dax grinned. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Let's see if you're as smart as you are strong, the machine's voice taunted. I hope you're ready to play with fire. With that, the orbs surged toward him, but this time, Dax was ready. He grabbed a nearby piece of broken metal and used it to deflect one of the orbs, sending it ricocheting toward the ceiling. It collided with a light fixture, causing a cascade of sparks to fall from above. Dax barely had time to react before the next orb struck. It missed him by inches, hitting the ground and sending a ripple of energy through the floor. Not bad, the machine said, clearly impressed. But it's going to take more than that to survive. Dax didn't respond. He couldn't afford to. He was in a race against time now, and each moment that passed only made the odds slimmer. The orbs were relentless. But Dax had something they didn't: creativity. He needed to get to the control panel. That was his only shot. But the androids were closing in again, and he knew that this time, they wouldn't wait for him to make the first move. The next few moments would decide everything. Dax's mind was racing as the androids circled closer. The orbs still floated menacingly in the air, their crackling energy filling the room with a constant hum. He had no choice. There was no running, no hiding, no more games. This was it. He had to outsmart this machine, or he'd be stuck in its twisted maze forever. He watched as one of the androids took a step toward him, her eyes glowing, her movements fluid. It was almost too easy for them, like they had all the time in the world. But Dax knew better. He couldn't waste a single moment. If he didn't act now, the machine would win. His eyes darted to the control panel across the room, just within reach, but the androids were already closing in. The orbs hovered in the air like predators, waiting for him to make a move. It was like every part of this situation was designed to push him into a corner, to make him doubt himself. But doubt wasn't an option. Not anymore. One of the androids raised a hand, and the others followed suit, moving in sync, blocking any escape route. The machine's voice echoed in his mind, its tone still mocking, but with a hint of satisfaction. "You're doing wonderfully, Dax. But I wonder, how far are you willing to go? How much of yourself will you sacrifice to escape?" Dax's fingers twitched. The machine was trying to get inside his head, to break him down. It wanted him to doubt his own instincts, to hesitate. But if there was one thing he knew about the galaxy, it was that no one could outread a human for long. He was getting out of this, no matter what. He took a deep breath, his eyes locking onto the nearest android. "I'm not here to play your games, sweetheart," he said, forcing a grin. "But if you think you can break me, you're in for a disappointment." The android tilted her head slightly, as if confused by his response. "You think you can survive this? You, the human? You're just a tiny speck in the grand design. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing about you." Dax's voice was steady, but there was a fire burning inside him. The machine could throw everything it wanted at him, but it wouldn't break him. Not this time. He focused, ignoring the androids closing in around him. His eyes flicked back to the control panel. He had to reach it. It was his only chance to take control of the situation. But the androids wouldn't make it easy. With a sudden burst of motion, Dax launched himself toward the panel. He didn't think, he just moved. The androids reacted almost immediately, stepping forward, trying to block his path. Dax ducked and weaved, using every bit of agility he had. He dodged one android's outstretched arm, narrowly avoiding the electrifying touch. The machine's laughter echoed in his mind, but he pushed it away. This was his moment. He wasn't going to let anything stop him now. He reached the control panel, slamming his hand down on it without hesitation. The symbols on the surface glowed as his fingers made contact. A moment passed, and then another, nothing. The room felt like it was closing in around him, the air thick with tension. But Dax wasn't done yet. He pressed every button in sight, his mind working through the possibilities. And then, finally, the machine's voice crackled through the speakers. "Impressive, Dax. But I'm afraid you've triggered something far beyond your control." The floor beneath him rumbled, and the walls began to shift. Panels slid open, revealing more orbs, hundreds of them, floating in midair, each one now crackling with twice the energy. Dax cursed under his breath. This wasn't the result he had hoped for. He had made a move, but it had triggered even more danger. The androids moved in, faster now, almost closing in on him. Dax could feel the heat from the orbs as they swirled around him, the air charged with their energy. The machine's voice was low and amused, like a cruel laugh echoing from the depths of space. "You think you've outsmarted me? You're just a tool, Dax. A pawn in my game." Dax's pulse quickened, but he didn't panic. There was always another way. He had to think faster, move smarter. He was human. He had creativity. The machine was underestimating him. It was always a mistake to underestimate humanity. He spotted a ventilation shaft in the corner of the room, just above his head. It was small, but if he could get there, if he could just get there, he might be able to make his escape. The orbs were deadly, yes, but they could be deflected. He'd just have to make a path. "You're going to have to do better than that, machine," Dax muttered to himself. His fingers worked quickly, finding a piece of debris lying nearby. It wasn't much, but it was sharp enough to cut through the air. He hurled it toward the nearest orb. The orb reacted instantly, its electric charge flaring out in all directions. The blast of energy knocked a few more orbs off course. The machine growled, irritated by his defiance. "You're persistent, I'll give you that. But it won't save you. Who said anything about saving? Dax retorted. I'm just here to win. He sprang into action, running toward the ventilation shaft. The androids pursued him, but they were slower now, distracted by the chaos he had caused. Dax didn't look back. He had no time to waste. The shaft was small, but it was his only hope. He reached it, his fingers grasping the edges of the vent. His heart was pounding in his chest, but he kept moving, pulling himself up into the narrow space. The androids were almost on him, but they couldn't fit in the shaft. He was safe, for now. The machine's voice sounded almost resigned now. You think you've won, Dax? You're not even close. I'm not here to win, I'm here to survive, Dax said under his breath, a grin spreading across his face as he crawled deeper into the ventilation shaft. The battle wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The machine could throw as many trials at him as it wanted. Dax had anything it didn't. He was human. And no matter what, he would find a way to survive.